Welcome back to the last episode of this podcast. So the theme of the podcast is Black History Month. It's October 2023 and it's saluting our sisters. This is the seventh and last episode, and we will be talking about what our panel members have been doing to celebrate and recognise diversity. Also recognising diversity within diversity. You know, we often get sectionalized into groups, but actually we are very aware there are groups within groups and groups within that, and obviously intersectionality. So we hope that you enjoy this episode, and please join us again for further podcasts coming up.
Over this month, what have you been part of, or what have you felt in your place of work or in your personal life that's actually been celebrating Black History Month and saluting your sisters? So apart from, we're obviously on the 31st of October, so the very last day, but actually there's been a whole month where we've been, where we not, as a system, as, so within your professional lives, but also in your personal lives, what have you been doing to celebrate?
I attended a women's conference.
Okay.
Yeah. It was with my church, but it was just solely for women, and it was a residential. So it was good to spend time with the sisters and talk about what we're doing and motivate each other and pray for each other and just build each other up, really. And I'm also part of the counselling team, so I've been helping that side of things as well.
Amazing. That's really good. And what about, have you been able to engage in any of the stuff in your professional life? So has there been anything that you've been able to do from a work perspective, anything that's been happening in the ICS where you thought, actually, I really want to engage with that, and I want to be part of it?
Yeah, so they did like a feature on me on the Alliance.
Amazing.
The Alliance did a feature on their newsletter.
Yeah.
So you all should have seen me on your email on the 25th. Talking about Black History Month and things that we could do to improve experiences for Black women in the workplace.
Is this NCGPA?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, awesome. Elizabeth, what about you? How have you so far celebrated?
I have just come back to work, so I'm literally just fresh into it. But I have seen Elizabeth's feature on the newsletter about it, and I on LinkedIn I've seen quite a few different organizations kind of like celebrating and highlighting their diverse, their Black role models. So it's been great actually, because they have been. It's amazing because obviously it sounds, this is going to sound a bit rude, but it's kind of like all the Black people have come out of the woodworks. Everybody's being celebrated. And, I am hearing about people that I've never heard before. I am seeing about people, reading about what they've done in their career. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That I could do that. Or, that I could aspire to that someday. So it's been great.
I think that's the beauty of social media as well, isn't it? Actually, the world becomes very small because you have access to these amazing examples and role models that previously we wouldn't, because we're in our own little circles, we're in our work circles, and I think that social media's got a lot to answer for as well. But actually, when it comes to things like this, yes, I completely agree. And it's just having that ability to see people not just within, for example, pharmacy or primary care. It's actually people in all different professional lives, and I definitely echo that. Idah, have you done anything specifically to celebrate this month?
Yeah, but it's not work related. So the area where I work, there is a lady who owns a shop, and she's from Ghana. She's amazing, good social network there, and she basically had a fashion show. So I know every so often she tries to get people to come together, whether it's just for lunch or just a picnic in the park. And she's basically brought women together Black minority women to come together and just kind of celebrate their achievements. And it was really good to kind of see the fashion show and what skills that we have in that diversity, because it just wasn't about the fashion show, it was about social networking. So it was really good. And, you know, unfortunately, I wasn't able to do a presentation, but she had asked me to do a presentation about my role. But yeah, that's something that I'll look forward to in the future, just kind of getting myself involved. And, you know, in terms of mental health and in terms of some ethnic minorities, it's kind of a bit of a taboo, a bit harsh. So I want to reach out to people to come and just to get the right support and just signpost them to services that may be helpful. So that's something I'm aiming for in the next coming up year, to actually work hand in hand with her.
Amazing.
But
and
in terms of work,
yeah. Sorry, you were saying in terms of work?
In terms of work, no, I haven't heard anything really. No. It's just a newsletter that goes by. Yeah.
So I was just going to say, in terms of the, you know, that event that she put on, because it was Black History Month and there was a specific light on saluting our sisters, there was that opportunity to be like, well, actually, because of that, I'm now going to ensure that over the next year, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make sure that I reach out and make sure that discussion around mental health, which is a taboo in lots of cultures, I'm going to address it. So it is that, although we say it's for a month, it's about actually how are we going to make sure that we roll that effect on to the rest of the year and keep that motivation going. The other thing that you said, which is so true, is a diversity within diversity. And I think sometimes we forget, like, you know, you are 5 Black women actually from 5 very different backgrounds that will bring 5 very different experiences, you know, to the conversation. And it's recognizing that actually Black women is not just a 2D thing. It's so very much 3-dimensional. There's so much richness, so much experience, and so much diversity within being a Black woman. And I think the recognition of that is really, really important as well. So thank you, Idah. Hashiat, anything you want to add in terms of what you've been able to do over this month?
Not really done anything officially this month, I would say. I think the most interesting Black History Month thing I had was last year, fortunately. And it was during my obs and gynae rotation in hospital. So I had one of the midwives who organized an event where she picked a day of the week where parts of the team were from like mostly Black ethnicity or Black background to come in with like their home cooked meals. Nice, and she got the snacks, and she had the books, she had the poems, she had pictures, she put in all the works, and it was like fantastic to learn. Even I myself was schooled. I learned a lot about a lot of things, and I was like really interested. Like I could see all the effort she put in and how she was really open to talk to everyone about different things that she was teaching. And I think she embodied the whole thing we knew about Black excellence. And it was a really good initiative. And I wish I would be in a place a bit more formal in next year, I hope, or maybe going forward. I think maybe not just the time of the month, or maybe not just 1 month in the year.
Exactly.
Probably do that over time as well. I'm hoping I can do that here.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that you mentioned food, because we had there was a within our team, I don't know, in fact you probably know him, James Waldron. He's another GP, and he does loads of work with Phoenix and Alliance. And he was recently talking about, you know, having these almost discussions around food, and actually how you know, almost like it's exactly what you said, like bring a dish, but what does that dish, where does it come from? What, you know, the conversation that you have around that, you know, food is such a massive social activity, isn't it? And you learn so much from just sharing that experience. So yeah, the fact that actually even within, you know, the Black community, there are so many different parts of it that will have such different food types. And we talk about Asian food, and you know, the South Indian food is very, very different to the Northern Indian food. And so, you know, even with, it's that whole thing again about diversity within diversity, and recognizing it and celebrating it. So Lucy, last but not least, so what have you been up to much? I know that obviously you had your own procedure as well, so you've had a bit of a busy month, but have you managed to do anything to celebrate Black History Month?
No, although having experienced the NHS as a patient just does remind me that, the NHS runs upon, only runs by it's a people business, isn't it? Absolutely. And the diversity of, you experience that and you think, the NHS could not exist without all of us. I think what I would say about this is the best thing I've done. I'm ashamed that I only do it once a year. And I really, because I think we've talked about the struggle, haven't we? We've talked about having to be the role model. We've talked about having to make ourselves visible and not be invisible and all of that. And I think Elizabeth said we are a statistic as well, and we're a really small statistic. So you add all that together, and as well as feeling tired, sometimes you can feel quite lonely. You feel an obligation, you feel a duty. You've got to keep going for those people coming behind you. But I think actually having a conversation with all of you makes me think, kind of, we're not alone, are we? And actually, we're 6 people who've never met before, all got really different backgrounds. I am the only non-clinician. I go nowhere near a patient, but I've never been more certain that we're all here to do the same thing, which is to serve our patients in our different ways, using our diversity. And actually to kind of come together makes you think, it's kind of Joe Cox, isn't there? There's so much more that connects us than divides us. Even though, as you said, Errum, we're all actually very different as women as colour. So I just think, for me, that actually having these kinds of conversations, they are so energizing, and it is what will keep us going, isn't it? I think if you think you're alone, that's a very difficult place to be, isn't it? So I agree. I think the benefit of Black History Month is it makes us do this, but we must keep doing it, mustn't we?
Yeah, it's not just about the month. It's actually, how do we make sure that we continue celebrating? And I think this year, for me, reflecting on this month, actually, I knew that I was doing this event and I almost just focused on it, but forgetting that there's so much more that can be done within the month that you can do to celebrate. But actually, what it's made me, on reflection, what it's made me do is, well, no, it's not just about the month. What am I going to ensure that I'm doing to uplift and shine a light on Black women within, my colleagues, within patients themselves, and their experience? How do we ensure that conversation happens? How do we make sure that we continue to be kindly curious and allow ourselves, or forgive ourselves for some of the mistakes we might make when it comes to terminology, but also, never shying away from asking what might be for some people really obvious things, but for others not so obvious. And I think that whole idea of representation and making sure that you carry the light and you leave that door open behind you, I think that's so important. I think when with the work that I do with NATH, I would love for, I know, Liz, you've already done it, but actually to be able to highlight, amazing women and I think the other thing that I've learned as well from Black History Month is it doesn't have to be just about, yes, we've celebrated Black History Month here, but actually going forward, it's taking that, saluting our sisters and saying, well, actually, sisters of all kind, because we also recognize that just being a woman is a challenge in itself in this kind of arena. So how do we ensure that we shine the light on women, women of color, and not to recognize and elevate the work that they're doing, and to ensure that they're not invisible, and that they are present and appreciated for all the work that we're doing. So I just want to thank you all for agreeing to take part. And I think it's so important, like Lucy said, about having these conversations and feeling like you're not alone, that actually this is not you. Sometimes it can feel really lonely, but when you have this type of forum where you just think, actually, 5 women of completely different backgrounds who've all come to say, I can be celebrated, I've worked hard, I'm here, I want my voice heard. It's about making sure that you continue to carry that light and you continue to be that advocate and you continue to represent in all of your different forums. But this, I guess, is more of a personal thing. But if there is anything that we can do at NATH to ensure that we're making primary care more inclusive, and we are doing, just as whether it's within our training, whether it's within our CPD events, whether it's in our face-to-face events. If there are things where you think, well, actually, no, I'd quite like to be involved, or actually, I don't think that this aspect of X, Y, and Z has been taken into account, come and have that conversation. I mean, I've always said, and it's funny, Lucy, because you've talked about it in terms of experience, but when I first started in medicine, I used to wear a hijab, so I was a very visibly Muslim woman when I first started, and for a range of reasons, I took it off. A lot of it was to do with how I felt it was a big barrier when it came to climbing the ladder, in terms of that experience. And it really is true. So that experience with my first educational supervisor made me feel like I was so not wanted. I was not wanted in that arena. And then I would have colleagues who would go out for, oh yeah, we went down the pub. Well, I'm not going to the pub because I don't drink. So actually, then I was like, well, okay, so no, I'm not going to go to the pub because I don't drink. But what can I do to make my life easier in my day-to-day? Or I'll take off the hijab. And I reflect on it. I just think, God, that was a really rubbish idea, Errum, but I've done it now. But hands up, it made my life easier as well, which is sad. That's not the way it should be. But I think because of that experience, now that I'm a little bit more established, or in a position where I feel as if I can use my platform, I go do, I have those conversations that are a bit awkward, and I make sure that I have my voice heard, because I just think I didn't feel as if I was allowed to, 10 years ago. But actually, even if you don't like that conversation that we're about to have, I'm going to have it because I want to make sure that my voice is heard. I just think I think sometimes it can be a burden, but actually it's exactly what Lucy said, which is it's often a privilege to be able to do that. And I've had lots of people that have come to me and been like, oh, I'm glad that you asked, because I wouldn't have asked. And so sometimes that's the other thing, isn't it? It's about feeling, if you're empowered and you have the confidence and you have that education and you're able to have that conversation with somebody, sometimes it's not just that you're having that conversation for yourself. You might actually already know the answer, but you want to make sure that every other woman in that room now knows the answer, and every other woman in that room feels as if next time they can ask. So thank you for coming. Thank you for taking your time out this evening, and it's been a really good conversation, I think. But yeah, I mean, if there's any last minute reflections, anything that you guys want to add before we go, I'm more than happy to stay on and have conversations if people want to. Otherwise, we can call it a night and everyone can get a cup of tea and get some sleep.
Thank you, and thank you for keeping with us. So this was the last episode in our Black History Month podcast. We're so glad that you were able to join us, listen, and hopefully reflect on what you've heard. If you have any further questions, if you have any suggestions of what further podcasts that you might want, in terms of topics that you might want covering, then please do get in contact at the Training Hub. So you can find further details on our webpage. So if you just go onto the Nottinghamshire Alliance Training Hub webpage, there is a specific tab for equality, diversity and inclusion, and you'll get more information and a feedback box there where you can input whatever topics you might want to have covered, and we'll definitely take those suggestions on board. So thank you again for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed this specific podcast on Black History Month, and look forward to meeting you again in the next podcast.